Okay, how's everyone doing? Today we are finally doing the third video in our Acts series, talking about why the early church was not perfect. If you haven't seen the other two videos, I'll link them here. I think I always screw up which side it's supposed to be on, but I'll link those there. And yeah, if you're not subscribed, I post videos like this every once in a while. So if that's something that interests you, hit the subscribe button. But yeah, let's get started. So first off, why did I feel like this was an important thing to talk about? Important enough to make it into the top 3 things that I wanted to highlight about the book of Acts and the things that we should be thinking about while we're reading this book. The reason is I feel like there's this temptation to think that the point of Acts is to provide us with a model and a manual for church. And I don't actually think that this is the case. And I think that sometimes we actually idolize the early church. We look at the things described in Acts, especially the things kind of at the start of the book. We love to quote the end of chapter 2, where it says, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common," and so on and so forth. Don't get me wrong. This is a beautiful picture of the way God is moving in the lives of these early believers and of the apostles. But the things going on in Acts are not being presented as the definitive model for how church needs to be done. I'm currently reading through Eugene Peterson's memoir, and it's all about his journey through ministry. And he talks about this realization that he had while he was in the stage of planting a church and figuring out what a church is. And so what he says, and so he kind of is reflecting on the book of Acts, and he says, "Acts is not a manual with blueprints and a set of instructions on how to be a church. Acts is not a utopian fantasy on what a perfect church would look like. Acts is a detailed story of the ways in which the first church became a church. A story is not a script to be copied." And so he's making this point that Acts is a story, not a manual. In the first video that I made on Acts, I talked about what genre this book would fit in. And I used Richard Thompson's category of theological history to kind of describe what genre this book would be in. This book is a story about the way that the word of the Lord is growing and being spread through broken, imperfect people. We're not meant to open up the book of Acts and take note of every little thing that the early Christians did and then make sure that it's replicated in our churches today. We're not meant to throw out centuries of tradition, centuries of church tradition, just because that's, not how they did it in the book of Acts. Humans have this problem where we look at the past through rose-colored glasses, meaning that we think it was better than it actually was. Sometimes we see the early church, as described in the book of Acts, as this perfect fellowship. But we know from various letters of the New Testament, as well as the book of Acts itself, that the early church was not perfect. There was disagreement and tension right from the get-go. There was class division, false teaching, economic inequality that was causing all sorts of issues for the early church. It's not this perfect fellowship that we sometimes think that it was. But God, by His grace, was working in this brokenness. That's the whole point. That's always been the point. The church has never been perfect. And we're missing the point if we're so focused on trying to get back to a point where we think that it was perfect. The book of Acts is a story of the ways that God is moving through His church. And by His grace, we get to participate in that today, in messy, imperfect ways, in a crazy, messed up world. Doing our best to stay faithful to God's mission, just like Paul and the members of the early church. Cool, well that's all I got for this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.